Hey everybody, it's Curtis again. Back with another. I'm gonna just kind of roll this. I'm gonna keep it rolling here. I'm back with another episode of Watch Curtis Code. Obviously, there was a little bit of a gap last week, as last week was kind of my conference week. Had a chance to look in on three different conferences. WWDC, that's Apple's Worldwide Developer Conference, came to San Francisco. So of course I had to go and see all the new cool stuff that I can utilize in my app. Also, what was in town is AltConf, which is based out of Boston, Massachusetts, but is specifically for iOS developers and Mac developers as well. A lot of focus at AltConf on accessibility and all the other cool features that Apple announced. So it was kind of a running conference that really kept up with the pace of what Apple was announcing. Another cool conference that I had a chance to attend for the first time actually was the Layers conference. Now, Layers is, if I can summarize it without dishonoring it, Layers essentially is a design-centric conference, meaning that it is for designers, it is for people that design apps, that design websites, that design, and they're designing everything, iPad apps, etc. But the courses were not so technical. They were courses that really gave the audience a chance to flex the other creative parts of their mind. In fact, one of the cool things that actually I don't have it here, it's in my car, but one of the cool things that I did was a former Apple design engineer came and taught us how to make these cool rope sculptures that were pretty awesome. So a lot of things that kind of tickle your mind in different ways, but there are a few tech-centric sessions. But all of these conferences, if you're not able to get into WWDC, they are all worth it at the time, okay? So just keep that in mind, and that's just a quick shout out to Jessica Char, Elaine Powell, all the folks that really, put their blood, sweat, and tears into creating the Layers conference, and all the other conferences, John over at AltConf. Thanks for helping me out at the last minute, and of course the folks at Apple, WWDC. Lots of folks gave me a lot of great tips. Ted over there, you know who you are. I'm not gonna put your name out there on blast. Also, some folks that we'll talk about a little bit later in our course, Buddy Build, and also Graphic by Autodesk. In fact, Graphic had a pretty good presence there. At the Layers conference, a new great prototyping tool that we'll talk about. In fact, we're going to do like a deep dive on that, and also Buddy Build as well, which is actually a way to help get your app distributed to folks that want to test it and get their feedback immediately. You might notice my setup's a little bit different this week. I'm actually recording the rant part of our podcast. Just because I wanted to get another new camera. I have the Logitech C920 here, and it has better resolution than my iSight camera on my Mac. I just wanted to keep polishing this thing over and over and keep giving you guys great benefit, because you guys are sticking in there with me. I see your views, I see your questions via email, all these cool things. So without further ado, let's actually get into our episode 3 topic. And let me go ahead and switch real quick to my my Sublime text file where I have the topics that I want to talk about. So last week we talked about hiring a developer. What are some things that we can do to try to rope or wrangle a developer to work on our project? Well, this week we're going to talk about hiring a designer, another centric piece of the puzzle here that we need to put together to build our app. Now, designers, not to sound too esoteric or too way out there, but designers are artists. They're creative people that like creative endeavors. They want the ability to, paint and put their signature, so to speak, on things that are really cool, really innovative, and also speak to the artist within. One thing that we can do to attract is ask ourselves a few questions if we're trying to attract a designer, okay? Or if we're trying to hire a designer, because let's be honest, there's quite a few designers. Okay, there's almost like a glut of designers out there that will design your mobile app or your website. Now, who's good? Who speaks to you? All these things are things that we need to be asking ourselves. In fact, as a designer and developer, designer first, I'm an artist first, I think about design first. How's this thing going to look? How's it going to feel? What are the things that I want to say by the design? How do I want to delight my users? Not to put too fine a point on it and go all Apple. How do I delight my users to where they're going to come back to this experience? How do I get them to convey the meaning of what I want my brand to be about? All of these things are questions that you want to ask. But I actually wanted to talk about 4 questions that kind of help me when I am hiring a designer, because sometimes, even if you're a designer, you also want somebody with a different perspective, a different background to add some value to your app. So the first question is, of course, do I like their work? It's a very simple question, but it's one of these things that can kind of take us down many different trails. And if we're not careful, we can get into this habit of loving everybody's work and not being able to make a choice. So that's the first question. Do I like their work? Does it speak to me? Do their design aesthetics, do they match mine? Do they complement mine? Do they have the same design values, so to speak, where, if they design something for you, they have the thought, and you have the thought that, wow, that's how I would have done it, or that's how I would have approached it. These are all things that really you need to kind of focus on when you're asking yourself if you like their work. The second question you need to ask ourselves is, of course, we talked about, do their values match, but are we willing to let them take a pass at our brand? Meaning, are we too caught up or too close to our brand where we won't let somebody else dress our baby, so to speak, where we have, maybe, I'll give you a perfect example. So years ago, I was working on a website, and I'm just going nuts. I love this app. I'm trying to, I love this website. I'm trying to build it out, and I design it. And I send it back to the client. The client says, well, these colors these aren't colors I like. In fact, I like my school colors that I went to school for. I want these colors that I have this affinity towards, and I have had for about 15, 20 years. And, it kind of shocked me, but it actually wasn't the first time that I would, or the last time that I would encounter this sort of thinking from a brand owner, because they want to feel as though they're involved in the creative side. They want to feel like they have something to contribute, whether it be color schemes or even the design or the arc of the logo. They want to feel like they're contributed to. So that's where design becomes one of these collaborative things where you want to please the client, meaning that you want to say, okay, we'll do it that way, but I also have an approach that maybe hasn't been thought of, or hey, have you ever thought about doing it like this with these different colors or whatnot? Being able to be flexible enough to help your client come to the realization that they hired you for a reason is instrumental. So on the brand owner side, you need to understand that for artists, they need to feel invested as well. They need to feel as though they're contributing something to your project, and they're putting their stamp on it as well. It is a collaborative endeavor, just like making a movie. There's hundreds of people in the credits, but oftentimes the people that get the shine or the reaction from the public is oftentimes the actors and the director, but it is a very highly collaborative endeavor in general. The third question is, where do I look for designers? Well, that's a big question. Essentially, there's tons of places. Right now, Dribbble is a huge thing. That's Dribbble with 3 B's. That is a... I'll come back to Dribbble in just a moment. There's Dribbble, there's Behance, there's DeviantArt, there's 99 Designs as well. 99 Designs is a place where you can go and submit a bid for your particular project, and you have a budget, and you say, I want to pay a designer $100 for them to create a logo, and that logo needs to have a snake in it or some incorporation of a snake, and it needs to do X, Y, or Z. Like all of these things are things that you can submit through 99 Designs. Behance is actually owned by Adobe now, but it's more of a portfolio site where you could essentially see your designer's art, you can see them progress, you can see their entire portfolio, and it's a place where designers are essentially looking for gigs. They're looking for work to do, and they're looking to work on big projects. Dribbble is, I say it's kind of my favorite, but it's also one of the probably the most destructive in a sense of building apps, because and hold on, just chill. I say it's destructive because I've noticed a few things. So there was about maybe 2 years ago, Dribbble is hot as fire. There's just tons of designers, and there still is tons of designers. And what I realize is that when you're hiring a UI expert for a mobile app design, whether iPad or iPhone, as a designer or even a motion artist, they go a little crazy. They don't really understand the principles of, or the limits or the boundaries in which a product can be programmed to. And so for that, I always kind of put a little asterisk next to Dribbble, and I say, your mileage may vary, because you want to find someone on Dribbble or any of these sites really that understands mobile design, and they understand the device that they work on has certain limits and restrictions, and those limits aren't really limited by the developer, but they are limited by processing power, etc. All these things that are tricky to do, and you have to kind of pick your battles and figure out, are these things worth doing, and do they add a lot of value to what the user is experiencing, or are they just fluff, or are they just icing on the cake, so to speak. I love Dribbble. I love looking at people's work and kind of being inspired that way too. So find someone, and maybe they're willing to grow with you, or grow to that level to where maybe you can explain to them exactly how an iPhone works, or how a certain device works, and what the boundaries are, and what things you want to get done in that project. So the final question is this: do I need to find the best designer in the world? Well, let's be honest. Yes, you need to find the best designer in the world to you. Meaning that I can't tell you how many times I've talked to startups, and they say, well, I have the best hacker in the world working on my app, and I have the best designer in the world working on my UI and whatnot. Okay, that's a relative term, because really, I mean, it's just like an ad agency. Everything changes in 6 months. Everything changes even at 3 months. And with the internet, things change almost on a daily basis. So we have to really kind of look at diminishing returns, and we also have to look at relative progress. We want to find someone that is of course, economically affordable, and also someone that does exceptionally well work. People that have a good track record of working with clients and doing client work too. I can't tell you how many times that has kind of gone bad as well. There's quite a few folks that they're artists, and as an artist I can speak to this. It's just they need to be in the mood. They got to light a candle. They got to they have to sip some coffee. They have to get into they have to do a ritual in order to be creative. And what you want is a working artist, not a starving artist. So my hat's off to finding someone that really understands where you want to go and can take your brand there. So that's my little rant about hiring a designer. Those are just a few key touchstones on which you can really kind of build and find out where you need to go and point yourself in the right direction. I mean, as I mentioned before, Dribbble, Behance, forgot the other ones. Rewind the video back and you can see. And 99 Designs, that's one of them. I know that one. And maybe there wasn't a fourth. Maybe I'm just overthinking it. Anyway, now let's get into the code. Okay, now we're in Xcode here. Now remember, last week we had, or the week previously, we had aligned our labels here inside of our storyboard, and we have 4 labels which actually represent our visual labels that we have in Sketch here. Let me zoom in so that everyone can see. So this is the view that we're trying to create here, okay? So keep this in mind. What we're going to do is we're going to switch back and forth between this app, Sketch, and Xcode, and we're going to make these 4, you know, funny looking labels that have no real design on them. We're going to make it look just like this by the end of this discussion. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it. So first things first, let's go ahead and go into our Swift file for this view, and let's align this to where, you know, we can actually read it. Okay, so let's go back to the top here, and remember, we've put these labels out here, and if we go back to our first label here, we've given it a tag, okay? And so we started to name these 100, 101, 102, 103. And this just basically helps us to identify them within code so that later on we can add value to them as well. So let's go ahead and let's make sure that we have everything wired up in our cell for item, cell for row and index path. So there's someone behind me. You know, this is the cool thing about doing this kind of live. You don't know what's really happening behind you, but that's okay. You know, we're here to do a job, and we're going to do it. You know, my promise to you guys is that I'm going to try to do this every single week so that you guys know exactly what it takes to build a product. Sometimes we have distractions behind us, but we can't be looking in the back. We have to keep continuing to move on. So remember, let's go back into our code here. So you'll remember last week we had set our labels, we had named them. So we have label date, which is the top label. Then we have the label title, which is the name of the actual signing event or autographing event. Then we have the event, which is the event in which this signing is happening. And then we have the status of that event, which is basically how much time is there left to sign up for it or take part in it in any way. And these are 4 basic pieces of information that I want to convey to the end user. So what we're going to do is this week we're going to just keep it designed, or we're going to design it to the specs that we have in our Sketch file. So going back to Sketch, let's tap on or click on in this aspect. So let's tap on our top label here, and we get to see the position of that label. So it's 15 in, and then 6 down, and then the width is 114 and the height is 12. We're not going to care so much about the height of this because Xcode has its own height default for a label. So the things that we care about is the X and the Y position, okay? So I know for a fact that all 4 of these labels are 15 pixels in, but the positions themselves are a little bit different. So we have 6 here for the date, we have 22 for the actual autographing or signing. Then we have for the event we have 45, and then for the status we have 17. So let's go back to Xcode and we'll match those values up. And we'll come pretty close here. Now let's go back here and we'll go to our inspector over to the side, and as you can see we have a couple different things happening here. So our X and Y needs to match what we have in Sketch. So let's do this first. Let's align them horizontally. Let's make sure they're at least 14 in, okay, or excuse me, 15 in. That's what I get. And then what I'll do is I'll go ahead and match the values. So we had 6 for that date label. Then I believe we had 22 for the next one, 45 and 72.
So let's get that as close as possible. So let's do 22. Then 45. Oh, excuse me. That would be 72. That label is not in the proper order. And let's make sure that this is 45. Okay. So it looks about right, with the exception of now we have, since the height of our label doesn't really match what we have, which is 12 for our one in Sketch, we'll go ahead and try to match this. Okay. And while we're at it, let's go ahead and go back to this inspector tab here, and we'll match the font here with 12. So it should be 12 pixels. And the color, let's go back and see what the color was for that. It's actually 10 pixels. And the color is this value. Go ahead and go back over. And for our text too, let's continue to make this bold, and we'll make it 10, which is what our value is. Done. And our color, let's do this. We have our nice color picker coming up. We'll go ahead and enter that hex color value right there, and we have a perfect match. So it should be 10 pixels and that color, and it's in the right position as well. Let's go back to Sketch. Let's look at this. Take a look at our signing event here, and we know it's Helvetica Bold 17. And let's go back, make sure that is Helvetica Bold 17. So we know it's 17. Let's go ahead and make sure that the font is Helvetica 17 and bold is the style. Go ahead and click done, and let's go get our color, because I believe we used a navy blue of some sort. So get this perfect blue color, make sure it pops, go back over to Xcode, enter our hex value for that color, and there we go. Won't really show up that well on the screen, but it does make a difference, trust me. Now let's go back to our event, the event in which the signing is going to happen, and we'll go ahead and get that same color, and I believe it's the same color as our date up here, but you'll notice the text is not bolded actually. It's just 14 point or 14 pixel, and let's tap on this, get the color right. And then it is 14. Let's get right here, guys. And we want it to be the custom font of Helvetica, and it's regular, no bolding, and make sure it's 14. Okay? And we're all done with that label, and that's going to be our event label. Now let's get the status. Now here's where the funky green color comes in. And it's Helvetica Bold 14, and this color, let's go ahead and grab that from our hex value in Sketch, and then we'll go back over here into Xcode, and it was Helvetica 14. Let's go ahead and mash this up. Helvetica, I believe it was Bold 14. Go ahead and match that. Let's get our funky green color there, put it in there, and I think we're looking pretty good here. So the alignment still looks off to me, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look here in the Sketch. Now the total height of this thing is 105 pixels, or points rather. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look and see the position here, or the height of that particular label is 12 here. Let's go ahead and see if we can do anything about making sure this thing looks really good, okay? Let's see. So let's go ahead and give it a run. see how it comes out in our simulator. Yes. Okay. Should be coming up pretty soon. And our graphics. There we go. So actually go back to our simulator. Yeah. So you can see, looks pretty good, doesn't it? So we have our date up here. I obviously need to do a content inset on this particular table view cell, but it looks a world of difference better than what we had in the first place. And so that actually makes it to where it looks really good. So I'm going to leave it as it is. For now, since we have a little bit of time left over, let's go ahead and put another value in there, just for ha-has. And so view did load. And I'm going to add I'm going to go to where I add my data in. And let me dismiss this real quick so that we're not taking up space. Let me close down our sample project too. And we have a line item here. And remember, this is static data that we're working with, just because we don't want to build it back in already and have to constantly go back and change it. What we're doing is we're working with very simple data so that we can prove the concept. Then once we prove the concept with static data, then we can go back and build our backend, and we'll know exactly what values we need to capture or which values we need to display. So we're going to go ahead and go back to our line object here. And this is how I created that one line, or that one value there, right inside of there. So our first object, remember, we have this Jim Lee signing, and then this was a description that isn't used in our final view, but it has all the other information, like how many people are in that line, and then the current number, and all that good stuff. So what we'll do is we'll do this. We'll add another object to that line, and we'll just comment that out. Always wanted to see Rob Liefeld and Jim Lee sign, so we'll go ahead and put in, we'll change this here, 2, 2, 2, 2, and don't let me forget about you, line 2, and I'm going to add line 2 to our final array, or line array. Okay, that is the array that will hold all of our data while we use it. Okay, so let's go ahead and change these values from Jim Lee to Rob Liefeld. Gotta spell the man's name right. Let's go ahead and copy and paste this here. Now, a little story about Rob Liefeld. Rob Liefeld and I, we built a project called Liefeld, and Rob was heavily involved in it. And you know, to me, it was kind of like the culmination of a dream project, because since I was a little kid, I've always wanted to draw comics for him and whatnot. I never really got that opportunity because I just wasn't really confident as a comic book illustrator. But I loved being able to, years later, tell him how he's inspired my career in design and development, because I always kind of think about things in the extreme way, which is the name of his studio that he had. It's called Extreme Studios. Right now, let's go ahead and test out our project and see if we have any issues here. So we just added another value, and this is still Jim Lee signing. What could possibly be wrong here? Well, let's go ahead and take a look here. Do we have all the right information? Well, let's take a look and go back to see what I get, because most of the time I don't remember that most of this stuff is static. right? So here we go. So it went and got the amount or the counts of which I brought back. So what we're going to do is it did capture 2 cells. However, the values specified are static as well. So what we're going to do here is we do have a final lines array which we've declared in our very first episode. But you know what? Why don't we save this for next time, because I think that this is going to require a little bit of explanation as to why it's returning 2 duplicates of the same values. In fact, I think it would be a great teaching point to teach you guys how to wire up dynamic data. Even if the data that we're using is static, we can still behave or have the app behave as if it's dynamic. So let's go ahead and put a pin in it for this week. And once again, I really appreciate all you guys' comments, all your great emails. If you want to get in touch with me, please email me at curtispope@yahoo.com. And if you have any questions, or if you're concerned about what you're building, if it's up to snuff, if you just want to even show off what you're building, please let me know. We'll give a special shout out to you on the show. Also on Twitter, hit me up. I'm at CLPope. And of course, this is another episode of Watch Curtis Code. I'm going to go ahead and end off there. Thank you, folks.